All right, Richard, do you want to open it up?
Yeah, it's all ready to go, Peter. You're spotlighted, so it's ready to go.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our Hope in the Time of Apocalypse series. This is the fourth one actually. We started in reality and now we've gone virtual. And we've had some fascinating discussions. I'm very appreciative of the time that people give to this, and in particular tonight, Brad Pettitt and Josh Wilson, whose time is very hard to get. But let me start with the welcome, which comes from our service sheet at St. Paul's, which we do every Sunday. We acknowledge the beauty and sacredness of this land, its ongoing formation from the beginnings of time, the traditional Whadjuk Noongar custodians, and all life and creation that has gone before us, of which we are a living part. Never more relevant than this week, and even today with BHP's announcement. We'll probably come to that. Certainly the issues of the day about Indigenous and Black matters around the world are very high, as have been climate change issues and lots of difficult things about living in the 21st century that seem to have got harder in 2020s, especially with COVID. So we're going to talk to Brad Pettitt and Josh Wilson about how they get things done and how we make changes. It's always a bit of a mystery for people outside the political system to understand why they don't just do it. What's involved is usually a bit more difficult than that. But let me start by introducing Brad. Brad has been the mayor of Fremantle since 2009, and before that was at Murdoch University, where we worked together in the Institute for Sustainability and Technology Policy, and Brad became the Dean of Sustainability out there before becoming a full-time mayor. Before all that, he was working for Oxfam in Cambodia and also working in Canberra with AusAid. So Brad's got lots of interests, broad interests, as well as a core interest in sustainability, which I think is certainly part of the agenda we need to talk about. Just introducing Josh as well, because I've said at any point he can jump in and join the conversation we're having with Brad. And if anyone wants to ask a question as we're going, there is a system of, if you want to go over the participants list and click on that, there's an opportunity to put a hand up. You can put your hand up and I can notice that, and then we can ask you to join if you need to. But Josh has been the member for Fremantle in the Federal Parliament, National Parliament, since 2016. I had a small rest for that migration thing in the middle of that, but back in there again. He's the Shadow Assistant Minister for the Environment, so he's got a particular environmental interest, but also infrastructure and many social issues that he gets involved in. He was a councillor in Fremantle before that, from 2009 to 16, which is quite a long stint, including 6 years as Deputy Mayor. So, Brad, tell me what you did today as the Mayor of Fremantle. What's the kind of things you do to be the Mayor?
It's every day is different, which makes it fun. So today we had a council meeting last night. So often what happens after that is the phone starts ringing pretty early with radio, wanting to kind of get an update of decisions we made. So the two ones that I spent a bit of media on today was we made the centre. Council agreed to lower the speeds in the centre of Fremantle down to 30 kilometres an hour to make it a more of a kind of walking, cycling, pedestrian zone. So that went through the council. So there was some interest in that in the media, as well as us temporarily cutting back services to our cat bus, which has been a difficult decision. We've been going through a very brutal budget time as a result of COVID that we've been working our way through. So there's this kind of good and bad news stories I was dealing with all day, as well as we've been doing. Actually, I just came then from a workshop with actually artists and creatives in Fremantle, and trying to help them as how we do that post-COVID, and how the city of Fremantle and the creatives in our community work together. So it's been a diverse day, but a good one.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could do something about that one. But interesting, the 30 kilometres an hour one, I remember that being raised many times and never, that was impossible to do. But do you think there's a change now with COVID that enables you to do things that a bit more differently, a bit more radical, a bit more opportunistically? Is there a new slate that's been cleaned that you have a chance to fill with something else?
There is an opportunity for speeding up change that you're right, it can be so difficult sometimes. So a simple thing like creating change, like creating a lower speed CBD environment, you think is quite simple. You put up 30k signs, but in Western Australia, councils don't actually decide speeds. It's decided by main roads. So all we can do is make a recommendation to the main roads department, who will then decide whether they agree or not. So now there'll be this negotiation. But what COVID has offered is, I think everyone agrees that physical distancing is going to be important. More al fresco out in all of our footpaths, on our road verges. That, in fact, much more use of our roads by pedestrians and cyclists. And all of those things, I think, make a strong case for not the usual bureaucratic approach where you've got to measure speeds for 2 years and average them out and the like, but actually just getting on and doing it. So we are trying to use COVID for some of these things that we've been wanting to achieve for a while, and hoping that they can happen a bit more quickly.
And are you going to be spilling out onto the strip to enable people to social distance whilst eating and drinking and enjoying the cappuccino strip?
I think it's going to be inevitable, especially probably a little bit later in the year as weather warms up, assuming that whole physical distancing thing has to continue. I think the Frio is all about lots of people. In fact, it works when you've only got thousands of people kind of actually coming together. And our footpaths and our sidewalks can't do that and maintain any kind of social distancing. So I think it would make sense on the weekends, especially, that you would look at some of those temporary closures of the cappuccino strip and the like. And I think there's a good opportunity there. It'd be fair to say, like all things in Fremantle, doing that's controversial. Some businesses think it's a great idea. Some think it's the worst idea ever. So we're still kind of working our way through that with them. But I think I think it will end up happening.
Very good. So I can understand why you could make the case that if you can't keep social distancing on the footpath, then you've got to spill out into the street. And that same kind of idea has been pushed in Europe now, it seems. So suddenly we've got a new opportunity to slow cars down and make them more attractive for pedestrians, which has always been a Freo thing, and one why hundreds and hundreds of families come down just to walk around, because it's the best free show in town. So yeah, I'm really pleased that that's happening, and it's been a long time. So what do you think about the time that it takes for these things? You've been the mayor now for, well, this is your third time, right?
Right, so it's more than over 10 years now. So yeah, just over 10 years. And I must say, there is that, it feels a bit like that Murphy's Law thing, where you kind of know that things are going to take a long time, but then they even take longer than that, even when you know that. And that certainly has been a bit of my experience has been there, where, and I just think of projects like the King Square redevelopment, and Josh was involved in this when he was deputy mayor as well. Getting a government department down to Freo has been something we've worked on since about 2011, I think. So here we are 9 years later, and they're here. The government workers are moving in, but that's how long these things can take, from idea, lobbying, working through complicated business cases to seeing developments actually built and occupied. It's change does take a long time, but I don't know. I feel despite that being frustrating sometimes, if you've got a pretty clear idea of where you want to go, then it's just about being patient and getting through the steps as quickly as you can in the circumstances.
So when is all that going to open? It must be close.
Yeah.
I know your building is still happening, but the other part seems to be ready.
It is. In fact, it would be opening right now if it wasn't for COVID, to be fair to say. So that's really, unfortunately, that timing was it was a bit tragic in the sense of the very week that the first of the workers were arriving, that in fact the opening process was really going to be starting was the very week that the shutdown happened. So those workers got delayed, and they're coming back now. But it'd be fair to say it's disrupted the retail on the retail options that we would have expected really to be coming into place now and probably opening up by around about September. I think now that's more likely looking like early in the new year before everything opens up. But that's not entirely bad. Our civic building and library will be finished towards the end of the year as well. So what will end up happening, I think, is we'll probably all kind of open up together in the first quarter of 2021. So it's been a long process, and but it's getting there. And it's just, even though I was walking around town today, you've got hundreds of those new departments of communities and transport people in town already, which is really good, as well as in the coffee shops and the like.
So how does it feel in the town? I was just amazed the last time I was walking around how empty it was, and you know, it's sad.
Yeah, it felt like the zombie apocalypse had happened for a long time, I have to say. There was weeks there where there was absolutely no one. It was extraordinary. Like, it's just been so now it's returning to normal, a new kind of normal. Slowly, there's a sense of people are back out again. Obviously, not every business has survived, and that's been a bit sad to see. I think probably about 20% of businesses may not reopen, but probably about 2/3 of them are reopened now. And actually, on the weekend, it had a nice buzz about it, but there's still a way to go for it to really feel like Freo's back to what it needs to be. Obviously, the markets probably won't be open until the next stage of restrictions lift. I don't think we'll have cruise ships back for some time, so there'll be a few things that won't be the same for quite a while yet.
So, Brad, you've made a decision to stand for state parliament in the upper house. Can you tell us your thinking and how that's happened? It's quite a change.
It's a really big change, and it's one that I didn't come to easily. It'd be fair to say that I have really loved this role as mayor, and to be honest with you, I would probably almost do it for the rest of my life quite happily. It's such a great role, looking after a place that you love and kind of working with people to make it better. So I will leave this, if I'm elected, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'll leave this role with sadness. But there was a really good opportunity, obviously, that seat has been vacant, was lost by the Greens at the 2017 election, and has been vacant from their perspective since then. So it felt like the timing was right. And also, I think one of the frustrations that you do get in this local government role is some of the things that you want to happen kind of feel like they do get blocked at that state level, where there's just that inertia or policy differences or different priorities that I'd like to be able to at least influence at a broader level and take some of the good ideas that Freo's had to a state level.
Okay. So, looking back, do you think you have been able to bring about change that's more sustainable in our city? Has it been worth your while, all those hours and hours spent in meetings and drumming up support, getting things through, going to all these extraordinary motions you have to do to get media? Was it worth it all?
Oh, Absolutely. I've loved it. I mean, it doesn't mean it hasn't been extremely hard. And I mean, I have been extremely blessed by having a smart, collaborative group of people to work with, both as counsellors and staff and community over the last decade, which meant that change could happen. And I think what we were able to do was actually have that long-term view. And it's a view that, to be honest with you, we're only part of the way there. And the vision for Freo was always quite simple, was that Fremantle to work needed more people living in the core of Fremantle, more people working in the core in and around Fremantle, and more people visiting. And we had to do that in a really sustainable way that actually kind of had the infrastructure for the 21st century. And that's been our pretty consistent vision for the last 10 years. And we are, I would say we're probably only halfway to delivering that, but we're on track to deliver that now. And that will keep happening for many years to come. And it's exciting. And I look forward to, even if I'm not in this role, to watching it happen from afar.
Now, I know I've known you for a long time, and you've always been a hopeful person. And
I think I learned that off you, Peter, the optimist.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a deeply personal thing, don't you think? And a spiritual thing. And I know you've had some background in churches over the years, but where do you get that spiritual strength from to when people are attacking you and it just seems ridiculously irrational and nasty? And how do you keep things going like that in a political world? I know you've had very good support around you and so on, but there are dark days as well, aren't they?
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, I grew up in actually quite a really strong church community, actually up in the hills in Rollystone. And I do think those values around service, around realizing that a life well lived is one which you do give as much as you kind of receive. I guess are those kind of values that do. I think they're probably not defining who you are, and for me, I guess there's that real sense of there's, I don't know, the social justice, the environmental justice, the things that we need to do I think are so important, and they continue to drive me again and again. And I think change is so important. We don't live in a world that is sustainable. We don't live in a world that's fair or just, and there are good reasons for actually trying to see that change through. But change is hard, and some people don't like it, and that's okay too. And then the real challenge then is making sure that we can have respectful conversations around the bits of the change that we don't agree on, and how we do that. And that's hard too sometimes. But look, it has been tough sometimes. I have had amazing family and friend support and support of my colleagues, and I really do look back on it as a really positive experience that I feel extremely grateful for, and one that feels like it's only half done still.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brad. More power to you. And I'll switch over to Josh, and we'll ask some of the same kind of questions. Josh, tell us what you did today in Canberra in the House of Representatives.
Well, I got up early and I walked through the cold fog from where I stay to the house pretty early, and my sort of first focus was I was speaking in a debate about radioactive waste facility piece of law that the government has brought in to sort of override some issues of community engagement and consent in South Australia, including with Indigenous South Australians, about the location of a permanent site for low-level waste. So, you know, I've nuclear energy, nuclear technology, nuclear waste, nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation are all abiding interests of mine. So I wanted to make a strong contribution in that debate. So that was probably the first couple of hours. I participate. I'm a member of a select committee on rural and regional Australia. And today we heard from people who come from the community foundation sector. And I know a little bit about that actually because of the Fremantle Foundation that Dylan Smith got going, and so many Fremantle people have contributed to. And community foundations do incredible work, but they're a bit limited by the nature of their status. They have limits as to where they can get funding from and how they can apply funding. So the committee meeting was focused on that. I participated in a sort of an internal Labor caucus committee. We have 7 or 8 policy-focused committees, and this one's called Sustainable Australia, and I participate in that because I'm Shadow Assistant Minister for the Environment. And we talked about a range of things. One of the things we talked about was the Jukan Gorge tragedy and the issue of heritage protection at the national level, particularly protection of Indigenous sites and culture, and the interaction between state protection frameworks and the Commonwealth protection framework. It's principally something that the state manages, but the EPBC Act and also the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Heritage Protection Act provides some avenues for relevant stakeholders to sort of seek Commonwealth intervention. I don't think there's any doubt that those mechanisms are not what they should be. They're not what they should be at the state level. We know that, and the WA government, that's why it's after various governments have tinkered with the Aboriginal Protection Act. The current government, the McGowan government and Ben Wyatt, are going to replace the current act with a new act, which is long overdue. But I think we need to do some similar things at the federal level. So yeah, that was probably most of my day, and I was fortunate this afternoon to have 2 or 3 hours of paperwork. I mean, one of the challenges I know Brad would experience, and so would other people in lots of different kinds of work, is just managing the variety of things that you have to do and being able to carve out some time that is focused for thinking and reflection and reading, which is very difficult. I mean, technology is incredible. This is incredible. I must say, I look forward to a time when I don't have to do 2 or 3 Zoom meetings a day, but it is a real challenge to not have a 60-minute period comprise 2 or 3 phone calls, 5 or 6 text messages, 7 or 8 emails, 10 minutes of reading something in bits and pieces. That's a risk all the time, but it doesn't. You cannot be at your best as a representative, and I would dare say in many professions, if you allow that to be 10 hours of the day. A few hours like that's okay, but you have to carve out some time. So this afternoon I've had a bit of that, and now it's 7:30, and Parliament is still going for another half an hour or so. But I'm not rostered on to be in the chamber, so I can do this without fear that the division bells will ring and I'll have to rush off.
Very good, and we thank you for that. And so just quickly on that Indigenous issue of the decade, the caves in the Injibati district, it just seems extraordinary that would have happened with Rio, who have had a pretty good record in my experience with Indigenous matters. They were the first really to have Indigenous employment, and up to 40% of their employment in the Argyle Diamond Mine, which was really set the bar very high. And they seem to have very good staff and everything, and just I don't think they'll ever get over it. And BHP, you see today, have announced that they're going to abandon one of their major mine sites that was going to be that was approved, but would have damaged caves. So it is a change, and pretty painful one. But yeah, we've got to get this one right now, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And it's terrible that the Jukan Gorge was destroyed in order to trigger the kind of wake up that we're having. But unfortunately, that's kind of in the nature of human existence, and we see lots of examples of it. I mean, this health pandemic is showing us some things about the way the world is interconnected and what we've done to the environment globally. One of the statistics that I find most frightening is that if you take the mammalian biomass on the planet, all of the mammals on the planet, only 4% of the mammalian biomass on planet Earth is humans and the animals that we keep. So when you've undertaken deforestation and very significant growth in human population and all of the other things that go with it, you push the limits of the system, and we are pushing those limits with climate in particular, but also in the way that different ecosystems and species interact. And a lot of the COVID-19 is something that's come from an animal species across to humans, and there've been a number of those in recent years. And the experts say, quite understandably, that is exacerbated by the unsustainable way we relate to nature. We can either. It's a sad thing that we have to sort of encounter something quite grave before we respond, but we at least have the opportunity to respond. We at least have the opportunity to do things differently. Certainly, with respect to Aboriginal heritage, the heritage system we have, it's a very passive, reactive one. There's no reaching out and sort of let's look at anything and everything that could be deserving of cultural and heritage protection. It's things come up as they are encountered through what is fundamentally a development approval process, and then the culture of that process over time and the various aspects of the system, both the culture and the system, the mechanics of it, tend to lead to an approach where you're sort of always looking to prioritise the development, and you're always looking to make the environmental value or the heritage value bend to the development need. And I don't think that's right. I know it's not right.
Yeah, well, knowing what's right. By the way, could you come a little bit closer? It just doesn't seem to be quite
noisy enough,
clear as it could be. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Knowing what's right. That raises the question that I gave to Brad as well. That your kind of spirituality, you're always very even. And to me, you are very sympathetic to quite a lot of these deeper causes, the social and the environmental causes that are part of our lives and necessarily part of the development process. You've had a different background. You grew up in the Orange people time. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it affected you and how it still affects you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who I'd describe myself as, I'm not a sort of a capital S spiritual or capital R religious. My background was as a kid born in the early 70s, a kid born into the counterculture and sort of New Age and Eastern spiritual interests, certainly that my parents had and that were present in Freo around the Orange people and a range of other related things, and that was obviously the sort of the dominant feature of it. That hasn't shaped me with any particular guiding ethos or master or book or anything like that, but I guess I benefited from living in communal situations and what I nowadays get described as kind of intentional communities. And I feel that Fremantle, it's one of the things about Fremantle actually, is that it's a kind of an intentional community. There are parts of the world where if you really ask why it is that people live in a particular area, particularly sort of an urban or suburban area within a developed world city, it's dictated by how close it is to where they work. It's dictated by property values, perhaps, and what happens to them through their socio-economic life. Whereas I've always felt that there's a big element in Fremantle, which is I I like this place and I like this community and it resonates with me and I want to be there. And I want to be there irrespective of those other kinds of issues. And there's something in that. So, you know, for me, touching on something that Brad said, the most important things are the things we share. For me, that's probably my kind of guiding mantra, that we live in a system that has certainly become more individualistic over time, and people can live more isolated from one another, less reliant on one another. And many of the structural features of our life that used to bring that collective element have dissipated. I mean, you know, religiosity, church membership, union membership, political party membership, working clubs, RSLs, the Buffalo Club, whatever. I mean, most of those things have diminished, and the membership has diminished, and the extent to which they are just, you know, 2 or 3 of those things are a feature of everyone's life has diminished. And so I think we have to kind of find new ways to be connected and to remember that, yeah, the most important things are our environment, which we are all responsible for, and we are responsible now in a geographical and spatial, you know, locus, but also sort of through time, intergenerational. We took stewardship of it, and we must pass on that stewardship. And that, for me, that goes for all of the big important things of life. Start with the environment, and then in a place like Australia, our public health system, our public education system, community infrastructure, public transport, the Fremantle Arts Centre, the Leisure Centre, our beaches, public transport, bike paths, all of those things, they belong to all of us. They are public goods that we all share in, and we all have a responsibility to look after.
And thanks for that. That really is helpful. And I want to open it up a bit to see if anyone has any particular questions. I noticed that Gerry MacGill is on the call. Gerry is in France, and I've been in email contact with him recently because he's, as you know, former councillor and the very involved in the North Fremantle Community Association, with all its issues there, which have been piling up. They were certainly in the firing line during the row 8, 9, 10 debate, and now they've got a particular interest in this, what the new bridge is going to mean. And it was announced in a flurry as part of a congestion busting announcement, which I always, I worry about that phrase. I don't mind COVID busting or whatever, but congestion busting, what are we doing? That just usually means a lot more cars and trucks and a lot more noise and difficulty. And anyway, I know you and Brad have had a particular interest in this bridge, this new bridge that we definitely need. And Gerry is, he's still there, I think. Let me see. Gerry, don't leave me.
I can see.
No, I'm here.
There he is. Good on you, Gerry. Do you want to ask a question about that, and then we'll get a... You look as though you've got a halo around your head, but apart from that...
Well, in fact, I turned my camera on with some trepidation because Michelle's forbade me to do so because I'm sporting a 3-month-old haircut, and she just, in fact, headed into the village to make an appointment for that to be fixed. So in her absence, I've actually turned the camera on for your benefit. What confounds us is that in this day and age of consultation and openness and so on, we now have a major project which is going to profoundly affect Fremantle, either for the better or the worse, being carried out in a hurry and in complete secrecy. We have no idea, apart from a line on the map, what this entails for us. And also, we have some serious questions about its justification in improving the access to the port. It does not, in fact, produce dedicated rail connection because there are too many other bits that need to be connected together. So we just wonder why the government is pushing it in that particular direction when at the same time it's supporting, seems to be supporting fairly strongly the outer harbour. So it seems a bit of a misapplication of resources to do the double bridge. We can talk about the single bridge as long as you like, as long as we know what it entails, and that we have some opportunity to participate in discussions about the design details.
Okay, thanks, Gerry. Let's just get a quick input from Josh and Brad. I don't want to spend too much time, but I've got a few other questions that are lining up.
Kind of falls very neatly between me as a local mayor and Josh as a federal mayor. Been a state project, so it's one of those we're in a slightly tricky position here where we're both getting briefed on a project that we don't control. The City of Fremantle, though, is on a stakeholder reference group for it, which is largely a technical reference group of state government agencies and the like, and trying our best to get some good outcomes in terms of, obviously there are things that we want to see, like as much in terms of retention of the old bridge, and both Josh and I were on the council when we put together a bit of a plan that actually saw the old bridge being a bit like a High Line in some ways. Look, I don't think that will be realised in the way that we imagine, just because there's some navigation channel kind of routes that the Department of Transport thinks make that not feasible, but we are kind of pushing that direction around some major retention of the old bridge. But it'd be fair to say, it's main roads-led projects are often challenging. They're very good at what they do, which is building freeway-type structures that funnel traffic very efficiently, but may or may not always leave the best community. I'm being polite here. May or may not leave the best community outcomes, and that's part of the challenge we're working through. Josh, I'm not sure what we're both probably feeling a little bit cornered here around what we can say, but Josh, you might want to add.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brad's sort of put it well, and I hear what Gerry's saying, and I think Brad and I, because we're not driving the project at times, have experienced those frustrations too. I'm glad that the City of Fremantle is engaged through that reference group in a more consistent way, and I know enough about what's happened to date to know that the city is focused on what this bridge could be and the good things that it could represent, and is wary of the things that it should be wary of. And I've had some involvement, and I take a similar view. So I mean, the starting point is that the 1938 bridge is long past its, not just its prime, but really, that needs to be changed, and it kind of comes back to where we started about happening quite quickly. So I can understand that there'll be some people now who say, well, why is this project coming on so quickly? But to be honest, if it had taken, if you had another 5 or 10 years to it, you just as reasonably say, when is this ever going to happen? So that seems to be, a bit of a, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I mean, the heritage of the existing bridge and areas either side is very important. The way that any adjustment to the bridge relates to North Fremantle and North Fremantle Town Centre is very important. The city is very mindful of the opportunity to create more space for Cantonment Hill and the naval stores. There's the issue of the pedestrian and bike path access, which with the existing bridge is very poor, and that could easily be much better, but the devil's in the detail. And then there's the rail bridge issue that Gerry talks about. Again, I don't think it's unreasonable to improve what we have, because there are times when there is an existing passenger and freight conflict, and I don't think that improving that is really a problem. If the current state government starts to go down a path that sees a shift towards the outer harbour either a more quick or a slightly less quick shift. The reality is that under any scenario, the Inner Harbour is going to continue to perform a freight task for a considerable period of time. And we know already under this state government that, to go from 7 or 8% of freight on rail to now 20% plus, that's a big jump. And this bridge, the additional rail capacity, should see that proportion move up into around the 30 mark. And that's really good. I mean, there's been a significant decrease in freight trucks on Leach Highway, which is a good thing. And it's part of the reason why we were able to win the argument to save the Bealio wetlands and stop Row 8.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Gerry, if you don't mind. And because we certainly do need to talk to state government people about it. There's a simple, easy question for both of you from Gabby Dean. Can you make some suggestions about how we can strengthen civil society and make our voices heard over the stridency of the Murdoch press, Kerry Stokes, Andrew Bolt, Clive Murdoch, Clive Palmer, Gina Hancock, etc. The continual funding cuts to the ABC and the abolition of the Department of Communication and the Arts seem to be aimed at muzzling alternative voices and eroding civil society.
You go first, Josh?
All right. Yeah, that's a bleak list, isn't it? That's a bleak list. Well, look, I mean, I think I come back to the theme of this series, hope in the time of apocalypse. I mean, I'm a hopeful person. You've got to fight. You've got to engage in activism. You've got to engage in the political processes that exist. We're lucky. We live actually in a world where there is a lot of that, at the local level, certainly, through formal political processes and informal political processes. And while I don't take the view, I don't have a rosy-eyed view of new technology. I think new technology gets co-opted by the big and influential players and used for their benefit. We see that through, Google profiling and directed ads and some of the crap that's been going on in the United States. But they are tools, and people are using them in interesting and creative ways. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little bit of an age-old thing. I still have faith that when people want to give some of their time and energy to a shared cause through activism, through collective pursuit of collective well-being, and by reversing some of these things, getting involved in campaigns, whether they're local environmental campaigns or whether they are political campaigns, because some of the things that we just mentioned, defunding the ABC and all these things, I mean, as long as we have this current government, some of those things will continue because this current government believes in doing that. So the answer to that is quite simple: change the government.
Very simple. Yeah. I thought it was a simple question. Yeah, but I like the fact that you both see that civil society's strength is in its ability to continually reinvent itself, which is what we are seeing in this time, particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement around the world. It's very strong. I do have another question here, which Paul Loring has suggested. It's more of a planning issue for Brad, I think. Freo needs to be bigger with a larger residential base. The problems we face is being surrounded by other local authorities on the east and government department-owned land to the west. So we can't even claim to be a coastal city because other controls so many other aspects. What hope is there that the other local authorities are supportive of Freo remaining and willing to let the city expand eastward?
The short answer to that is probably not very supportive. Local government amalgamations or boundary adjustments are very fraught, and actually the city of Fremantle, I think, again, both Josh and I were on the council at the time, was quite supportive of, especially Barnett's, in Barnett's day, because we negotiated quite a good outcome where Fremantle would actually have extended or up out to Stock Road all the way up to the river. And then and then further south down to around about Phoenix Road or something like that, I think. And our population probably
Yeah,
only
right, yeah.
about 20. Yeah, that's right. Up around up to about 55,000. We're only just over 30 now, and that was a pretty big jump, and would have really helped actually in terms of our base. Because Paul's right, Fremantle is a port city that does a lot of really major regional things with a very, very small rate base, and that provides some huge challenges. And I think if you wouldn't design a local government this small again, you would actually want it to be somewhat bigger. So yeah, but doing that is very, very fraught. So that's why the approach that we've taken is actually, well, then how do we actually get more people into Fremantle and do that in a way that actually is about populating those key bits of Fremantle. So taking the Freo CBD, where we're going to quadruple the population living there, and then key growth areas like the Knutsford precinct and around that, the heart of Beaconsfield on South Street, and there are really opportunities for growing Freo's population using our existing boundaries, and that's the more pragmatic approach we've taken, and that's yielding fruit.
Yeah, those projects are big ones, and you're going to abandon us to keep it going by ourselves. keep an eye on them from above. Okay, Brad, Josh, did you have anything to add to that?
I think it's right that it would give Fremantle more oomph if it had grown, and I think Paul is right to say that. But yeah, you make of it what you can, and I think really just to go back to what Brad said, I mean, a significant amount has changed in his period as the mayor of Fremantle, and I think the significance of that will probably grow over time, but it's been enabled, and I think what I do is enabled by the community that we represent. There are not many places that are as sort of engaged as Fremantle, with so many people who have ideas and who have questions and who encourage you, and sometimes challenge you and sometimes criticise you, but usually in a constructive, well-meant way. But it is healthy too that as we go and as we evolve, that these things shift. And I mean, I know just watching the council of the city of Fremantle, there's 13 people, Brad and 12 councillors, and Brad's been the mayor since 2009, but the council has changed quite significantly through that period. And the way it's changed is with new, interesting, different people coming on and making their contribution. And that's, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about politics, capital P politics, or community organisations. You need that refreshment and that sort of many hands sharing the work for it to be as sort of vibrant as it can be.
Very good. Rosemary Spark, who with Rory Jack used to live in the heart of Beaconsfield, she's asking, when's it actually going to happen, Brad? There's this great big piece of empty land there now as you go along South Street. Very big opportunities, but not much happening there.
So the structure plan was signed off by the council only this month or late last month, and that's now with the West Australian Planning Commission, who will ultimately be the decision maker. It's getting close. So once the WAPC makes that call, then they can kind of get on with the next level of planning and development applications. So being realistic though, I still think you're probably 12 months away from seeing substantial work on the ground. But these are big projects, and these are projects that will take a decade. And I think part of the challenges we've seen with other sites like Knutsford, where they've had to stage that. I mean, the demand for new residential is slow, and has been slow probably since about 2014 in Western Australia. So having to stage those projects anyway over time to make them happen. And but yeah, it's getting close.
Good. All right. Well, we've got 5 or 6 minutes left if anyone did want to raise a question. Otherwise, I'm happy to finish early. I know Josh has to.
I have a question, Peter.
Oh, okay. Chris.
Yeah, thanks. So when it comes to a sort of spiritual foundation for change, I like to draw on the prophetic tradition, which is over 3,000 years old in Judaism and Christianity. And basically the prophets say to the rulers, look, stop oppressing the poor and start ruling with justice, which sort of brings me to neoliberalism, which has sort of pervaded everything. The neoliberal thinking, whether we admit it or not, has pervaded the economy and the whole of society for 40 years or more. And I suppose Keating would probably say it's a neoliberalism we had to have. And interestingly, this week I see in crikey.com that the Greens are heading down the same track in the interests of attracting the Western suburbs vote. So in terms of looking for hope in the situation, perhaps you, Brad and Josh, can give me a bit of a rundown on where you see your respective parties going and what hope is there in the face of this sort of social contagion of neoliberalism.
Nice, easy one to finish with. And can you go first, Josh? And because you do have to leave for another meeting, I believe, right on 6.
Yeah, sure. I mean that's a very kind of deep
come a bit closer
and thoughtful frame. Sorry, that's a very deep and thoughtful, frame with that sort of opens up. I mean, I feel like I'd have to submit a kind of a detailed essay to do it justice. But I mean, I think you're right about the pervasive nature of neoliberalism, and one of the aspects of it is that everything kind of has to do with money. Everything is about money, and we justify the arts because of the value of the industry. We talk about the Great Barrier Reef because it brings in tourism. That is something that is not right. I mean, that's not what markets or money as a method of exchange. That's not what it's for. That's not what. There's nothing good about that. So that has to change. I mean, my feeling as a member of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party is that we are a part of a cycle where we are being very critical of that way of thinking, and we have turned away in a policy sense from some things. I mean, the policy platform that we had in terms of economic policy going to the last election was one of the more left-wing sets of economic policies that I can remember. That didn't make it electorally easy. I mean, we were prepared to talk about some of the big changes like Hawke and Keating made. I mean, there was no capital gains tax until Hawke and Keating came along. There was no superannuation. We were talking about things like franking credits. We were talking about changing the economic policies, but they are very much about turning the wheel back away from a system that grows inequality and makes the delivery of social services and the things we share that much harder. But probably to finish on what you said about the profit, I mean, we don't have that equivalent feature of our world now, and what we have is political activism, persuasion, campaigns, and elections, and it is difficult. It is difficult to win that kind of change because we all have to look at ourselves. We all have to admit there is some conservative element in all of us, and there's nothing wrong with that conservative element. Conservative thinking is Victoria Hall, and we're going to upgrade the town hall and those sorts of things. But it's also what makes us say, I don't know, I'm worried, I'm happy the way things are, and I suspect that this change might alter my circumstances, and I would rather stay with things the way they are. And we all need, particularly in a progressive place like Fremantle, because Brad will agree with me on this. I mean, we're constantly told, the media will have a go at us, oh, you represent, you know, hippie, lefty, greeny, progressive Fremantle. There have been so many instances when I've been part of a change proposition in Fremantle where the pushback is pretty fierce. The pushback, the kind of, how dare you even think about doing what you're talking about. So I think that's something that is actually a personal challenge to all of us when we feel threatened of change, is to take a deep breath and say, well, you know, is this something that makes sense and that needs to happen? And I need to perhaps try personally to overcome that resistance, because, you know, unless some incredible prophet turns up, we only have the processes that we have.
Very good. I think it is a struggle always, and I really appreciate the fact that you are struggling as our representative in the federal arena, and good luck to you. And
thank you.
That's your bell. So
that's my bell.
Say goodbye to Josh, and
yeah, right.
And Brad, you can have a go at the big question of neoliberalism.
Thanks, Josh. Good to see you.
Yeah, I will miss that. I will look for the recording of your answer. See you all.
See ya.
Thanks. Yeah, it is a really big question, and look, it's actually one that I struggle with a bit, because I guess part of the approach I've taken has to be quite pragmatic, and I think that there's something about local government that makes you kind of actually say, well, how do you pragmatically actually get outcomes? Because there is an ongoing joke is that people don't care if they're, you know, if they're garbage picked up by somebody from the Labor Party, Liberal Party, or someone who doesn't believe in neoliberalism. What they care about is that you provide good services. But that said, that frame though is really important. But for me, I guess what drives me is actually how do we, I think we as a society have to face a major change over the next decade. And we haven't talked about climate tonight, but we have to get on. This is for me the big issue that we need to address. And I don't think a neoliberal solution by itself will do that, but I also don't think we've got time to just talk about neoliberalism versus other methods, and actually to say we actually all need to find some approaches that help us actually get on top of the climate crisis that is right before us. And I think they are some of the conversations that I hope that, in terms of be it my role here in local government or my role if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the state government, that I hope we can actually achieve, is actually shifting the conversation on those things and actually getting those changes. And if we can get those changes using market mechanisms, I'm happy to do so. If we get those changes using other mechanisms, good as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Brad, and thank you for everybody's attention and questions. And I think we've been very privileged to have the time of two busy people who do reflect on these issues and who think about it, and at the same time are able to make a difference. And we can't underestimate the sacrifice that's involved in doing that. It's not an easy job, with the time it takes and the energy and the constant barrage of people demanding things. So thank you, Brad and Josh, and we'll have another hope in a time of apocalypse next week, and see if we can't solve the world's problems from our little spot in Fremantle. But thanks for helping us to understand our own place a bit better, and we can say farewell. So thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming along and hearing. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.